Hello, I'm Dr. Frank Costantino, the Chef Doctor. We're launching a new series here on my channel talking about simple things to make your cooking better. And today's first episode reflects on some questions I get asked all the time. Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Costantino. Your important lesson here today. So I get asked all the time questions about food and cooking. And the one question I get asked most frequently is, how can I become a better cook? Well, that's a long answer. But there are some things that we can do to make our cooking better right from the beginning. Actually, there are three things, and I'm going to talk about those things today. And they may surprise you. The first thing we're going to talk about is salt. Well, we should be cooking with salt. Right? Salt is a very important ingredient and enhances the flavor of food. But what most people use in the kitchen when they're cooking is table salt. And table salt is just that. It's for the table. So I'm going to encourage you to think about switching salts. At a minimum, we should want to be working with kosher salt for all of our seasoning needs. Kosher salt is pure. It's got a clean taste. Not the medicinal taste that iodized table salt has. But it also gives us the ability to season and feel the salt as we're putting it into the food. Let me show you what I mean. With kosher salt, we can put our seasoning right on the food. We can feel the crystals in our fingers. And we get a beautiful covering if we're seasoning meats or things or adding stuff to a sauce or a salad. So at a minimum, we want to switch over to coarse kosher salt. Now, however, we can upgrade that as well. And one of the things we can do to upgrade is switch to a coarse sea salt. Sea salt, again, we're talking about levels of purity here. The sea salt is going to give us a nice flavor, pure, and it's going to enhance the foods that we're eating. There are some other considerations with salt as well that we could think about. And I would classify these as finishing salts. And again, they're not entirely necessary. If you're using kosher salt in your seasoning as you're doing your cooking, the flavors are going to be really good, but we have other options as well. Of course, we can go to the French sea salt, okay, which is a gray salt, very fine. This would be considered a finishing salt. So we put a little bit of this down on our food as we're finishing up the process. There are also some flavored salts as well. This is an elderberry wild sea salt. This would be another example of a finishing salt. So again, not a seasoning salt, but something that you would put down on your food right at the end. It gives a little bit of character, a little flavor, and that little bit of zest at the end to bring the natural flavors out. Okay, so what's the second thing? The first thing is salt. Well, you're right. The second thing is pepper. Now, if you're using pure ground white pepper or black pepper that you're buying in the supermarket in those little tin cans, and especially the ones that are really finely ground, don't do it. Once those are ground, they're going to take on a medicinal taste, and when you put it into the food, you're going to get that sharp medicinal aftertaste, not the fruity taste that you should be getting from peppercorns. Peppercorns are the fruits that grow on vines in tropical climates. And I said fruit, so that's interesting. We don't think about peppercorns as fruit because of their spiciness, but if you're using freshly ground pepper, you're going to get that fresh fruit every time. Let's take a look. So I have a basic pepper mill here. You can see this is going to give us a really nice grind. And I can smell immediately the aroma of that pepper coming right up. Pepper is so important to me that I actually make my own pepper mills. That's how important it is to have freshly ground pepper, and I make them in all shapes and sizes. Table pepper mills, some of the smaller shaped ones here. The reality is, fresh pepper is essential. If you're doing a lot of cooking, you can surely batch grind a bunch of peppercorns at the beginning of the week, put them in an airtight container, just what you're going to use for the week. You can use a spice grinder dedicated towards spices or a coffee grinder dedicated towards spices, or you can even use the Vitamix to grind pepper, which is what I do at home. Peppercorns come in a variety of colors based on the maturity of the fruit. They can go green, pink, white, or black, and each has its own nuance of flavor. I encourage you to try all of them and see which one works best for you, but black or white works really well. Black on grilled meats and things, white if you're cooking fish, seems to be the way it tends to work out. So what's the third thing? Well, this is important, because the third thing are fresh herbs. Fresh herbs are essential in cooking, and particularly in the finishing of a dish. I wouldn't conceive of serving a dish that didn't have a finish of at least some chopped Italian parsley and perhaps some chopped chives or cut chives as well. And this is something that's important because it adds the bright notes to the food just before you're serving. Notice I mentioned about the fresh herbs as a finishing. Dried herbs and spices are wonderful and they add a lot of flavor to the cooking process, but dried herbs never equate to the fresh relative. Dried rosemary, dried thyme, dried basil, for example, never equate to the freshness. So perhaps if you're cooking with thyme or cooking with rosemary through the process, for example, roasting a chicken or preparing a dish that has those flavors, finish with a little bit of fresh rosemary, a little bit of fresh parsley. It's going to enhance the flavor of the dish immensely. It's those bright notes that people say, that really has a great flavor. Love the way that tastes. We'll talk more about herbs in future programs because they're so important. So there you have it. 3 things you can do immediately to become a better cook. Kosher salt or sea salt, freshly ground pepper, and fresh herbs. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Please subscribe to my channel for future programs. We'll be covering a lot of topics in the area of food and food lifestyle. Thank you.